The fluorescent lights of the emergency room cast harsh shadows across Maya Chen's face as she clutched her mother's medical files against her chest. The papers were wrinkled from her nervous grip, stained with tears she hadn't realized she'd shed. Around her, the controlled chaos of St. Margaret's Hospital continued its relentless rhythm, nurses rushing past with urgent purpose, monitors beeping their electronic symphonies of life and death, families clustered in corners sharing whispered prayers and fears. Maya's mother, Lin Chen, lay unconscious in the ICU 3 floors above, her body failing after a stroke that had struck without warning during what should have been a routine morning. The doctors spoke in medical terminology that Maya struggled to understand, but their expressions told her everything she needed to know. Her mother needed immediate surgery, followed by months of rehabilitation in a specialized facility. The cost was astronomical, nearly $200,000, a sum that might as well have been $2 million to a 24-year-old graduate student working part-time at a campus bookstore. The insurance company had already delivered their verdict with clinical efficiency, experimental procedure, not covered, claim denied. Maya had spent the last 18 hours on the phone with representatives who spoke in rehearsed sympathy while systematically dismantling her hopes. She'd exhausted every avenue she could think of: family loans that didn't exist from relatives who barely scraped by themselves, medical payment plans that required down payments she couldn't afford, charity programs with waiting lists that stretched months beyond her mother's critical window. As she sat in the hospital's financial aid office for the third time that day, Maya felt the crushing weight of helplessness settling over her shoulders like a lead blanket. The financial counselor, Mrs. Rodriguez, had been kind but frank. Without the surgery within the next 48 hours, her mother's condition would deteriorate beyond any possibility of recovery. "I've looked at every option," Mrs. Rodriguez said gently, her own frustration evident in the lines around her eyes. "The foundation grants are all allocated for the year, and the emergency hardship fund has a 6-month waiting list. I wish I had better news." Maya stared at the stack of rejection letters on the desk between them, each one a door slammed shut in her face. She thought about her mother's hands, strong, calloused from years of working double shifts as a seamstress to pay for Maya's education. Those same hands had stroked Maya's forehead through childhood fevers, had taught her to fold dumplings during Chinese New Year celebrations, had never stopped moving in service of others. Now they lay still, and Maya couldn't find a way to help the woman who had sacrificed everything for her. The walk from the financial office to the hospital's main lobby felt endless. Maya's legs moved automatically while her mind reeled through increasingly desperate scenarios. She could drop out of her graduate program and work full-time, but even with a good job, it would take years to earn enough money, years her mother didn't have. She could try crowdfunding, but who would donate to a stranger's cause in a world full of competing tragedies? The lobby was quieter than the emergency wing, filled with the muted conversations of visitors and the soft shuffle of people moving through one of the most difficult periods of their lives. Maya found herself gravitating toward a small seating area near the windows, where late afternoon sunlight streamed through the glass in golden bars. She pulled out her phone and began typing a post for social media, then deleted it. Started a text to her best friend Sarah, then erased that too. What was the point of sharing her desperation when no one she knew had the resources to help? Instead, she found herself opening various medical crowdfunding websites, scrolling through hundreds of campaigns from people in situations eerily similar to her own. Families pleading for help with cancer treatments, parents seeking funds for their children's surgeries, elderly patients needing experimental procedures. The numbers were staggering. Most campaigns fell far short of their goals, and even the successful ones had taken months to reach their targets. Time Maya didn't have. She was about to close her laptop when a notification appeared in her email, a response to a forum post she'd made earlier in a support group for families dealing with medical crises. The subject line was simple: regarding your mother's situation. Maya hesitated before opening it. She'd received several responses to her post, mostly well-meaning advice about resources she'd already explored or expressions of sympathy that, while appreciated, didn't change her reality. But something about this email felt different. The sender's name was listed simply as D. Morrison, and the message was brief but direct. I read about your mother's condition in the support forum. I may be able to help with the medical expenses. If you're interested in discussing this, please meet me at the Westfield Coffee Company on 5th Street tomorrow at 2 p.m. I'll be wearing a blue scarf and carrying a copy of the Financial Times. This is not a scam or solicitation. I'm someone who has been in a similar situation and believes in paying forward the help I once received. Maya read the message 3 times, her skepticism warring with a desperate hope she was afraid to acknowledge. In her exhausted state, every instinct screamed that this was too good to be true, probably a scam designed to prey on vulnerable families in crisis. But the message wasn't asking for money or personal information, just a meeting in a public place. And, with less than 30 hours remaining before her mother's window for surgery closed, Maya realized she couldn't afford not to investigate any possibility, no matter how unlikely. She crafted a careful response, agreeing to the meeting while maintaining appropriate caution. As she hit send, Maya felt a strange mixture of hope and terror. She'd reached the point where a stranger's offer represented her last chance, and that realization was both humbling and frightening. In the ICU upstairs, her mother continued to fight for her life while machines monitored every breath. Maya gathered her things and headed back to maintain her vigil, carrying with her the fragile possibility that tomorrow might bring the miracle she desperately needed. The evening passed slowly as Maya alternated between sitting beside her mother's bed and pacing the hospital corridors. The medical staff continued their careful monitoring, but Maya could see in their expressions that time was running out. Dr. Patricia Hendricks, the neurosurgeon who would perform the operation if funding could be secured, stopped by around midnight to check on her patient and speak with Maya. "Your mother is stable for now," Dr. Hendricks said quietly, "but we're seeing signs that the damage is progressing. Every hour we delay increases the risk of permanent complications. I've been doing this for 20 years, and I've seen what happens when finances delay necessary care. It's the part of medicine that keeps me awake at night." Maya nodded, unable to trust her voice. Dr. Hendricks had been one of the few people who'd spoken to her without the careful detachment that most hospital staff maintained. The surgeon's frustration with the system was evident, and Maya sensed that she too had fought these battles against bureaucracy and economics that reduced human suffering to balance sheets and risk assessments. "There has to be something else we can try," Maya said finally. "Some program or foundation or..." "I wish there was, Dr. Hendricks replied, her voice heavy with the weight of similar conversations she'd had countless times before. "The hospital has already agreed to reduce their fees by 30%, which is substantial but still leaves us far short of what's needed. The reality is that our healthcare system has gaps, and sometimes good people fall through them." After Dr. Hendricks left, Maya returned to her mother's bedside and took her hand. The skin was warm but unresponsive, and Maya found herself talking to her unconscious mother as if she could somehow communicate through the barrier of the coma. "I'm going to fix this, Mom," she whispered. "I don't know how yet, but I'm going to find a way. You didn't work 3 jobs to put me through school just so I could give up when things got hard. Remember what you always told me about the bamboo? How it bends in the storm but doesn't break? I'm going to be like the bamboo." The night stretched on with Maya dozing fitfully in the uncomfortable visitor's chair beside her mother's bed. Nurses came and went with their regular checks, the quiet efficiency of night shift professionals who understood that families needed space to process their fears. Maya's dreams, when sleep finally came, were filled with images of numbers, medical bills growing like malignant tumors, bank account balances shrinking to nothing, digital countdown timers ticking away precious hours. She woke around 6 in the morning to find Dr. Hendricks standing beside the bed, reviewing her mother's chart with a grave expression. The surgeon looked up as Maya stirred, and their eyes met across the narrow hospital room. "How long do we have?" Maya asked, the question emerging from her lips before she'd fully awakened. 18 hours, Dr. Hendricks replied without sugarcoating the reality. "After that, we'll be looking at palliative care rather than curative treatment. I'm sorry to be so direct, but you deserve to know exactly where we stand." Maya felt the world tilt slightly, as if the hospital room had become unmoored from solid ground. 18 hours to raise nearly $200,000, an impossibility by any reasonable measure. But, as she looked at her mother's peaceful face, Maya felt something hardening inside her chest. Not resignation, but a fierce determination that surprised her with its intensity. "Then, I guess I better get started," she said, standing and gathering her things. "I have a meeting this afternoon that might change everything." As Maya left the hospital that morning, she carried with her the weight of 18 hours and the fragile hope that a stranger's offer might represent the beginning of something extraordinary. She didn't know that her story was about to become part of a larger narrative about human resilience, about the power of individuals to create change when systems fail, and about the way crisis can forge strength from the most unlikely materials. The morning sun was rising over the city as Maya made her way home to prepare for the most important meeting of her life, unaware that she was about to encounter a force that would not only save her mother but transform her understanding of what was possible when human will met human compassion. Part 2, The Stranger's Proposition. The Westfield Coffee Company occupied a corner building on 5th Street, its large windows offering a view of the steady stream of professionals, students, and shoppers that gave the downtown district its animated energy. Maya arrived 15 minutes early, her nervous energy making it impossible to sit still anywhere else. She'd spent the morning researching everything she could about potential scams involving medical expenses, memorizing warning signs and safety protocols for meeting strangers who claimed they wanted to help. The coffee shop was busy enough to feel safe but not so crowded that private conversation would be impossible. Maya ordered a small coffee she didn't really want and found a table near the windows where she could watch for someone matching the description from the email. Her laptop was open in front of her, displaying her mother's medical records and the documentation she'd assembled over the past 2 days, a paper trail of desperation that chronicled every avenue she'd explored and every door that had closed in her face. At exactly 2 o'clock, a woman in her mid-50s entered the coffee shop, scanning the room with the purposeful gaze of someone looking for a specific person. She wore a navy blue scarf draped over a well-tailored coat, and carried a copy of the Financial Times under her arm exactly as promised. But what struck Maya immediately was the woman's bearing. There was something both elegant and determined about her presence, as if she was accustomed to making things happen rather than waiting for them to occur. The woman approached Maya's table with a slight smile. "Maya Chen? I'm Diana Morrison. Thank you for agreeing to meet with me." Maya stood to shake hands, noting that Diana's grip was firm and her eyes were direct, none of the shifty behavior Maya had been warned to watch for in potential scammers. "Thank you for reaching out. I have to admit, I'm skeptical about this whole situation." "You should be," Diana replied as they settled into their seats. "In your position, I'd be questioning everything and everyone. Mind if I get a coffee before we start? This conversation might take a while." Diana returned with a large coffee and a pastry, settling back into her chair with the relaxed posture of someone who had all the time in the world, a stark contrast to Maya's awareness that every minute was precious. Diana opened the Financial Times and removed a folded sheet of paper from between its pages. "Before we begin," Diana said, "I want to show you something that might help explain why I reached out to you." She unfolded the paper and slid it across the table. It was a photograph of a young woman, perhaps 19 or 20, standing beside an older man in what appeared to be a hospital room. Both were smiling, but Maya could see the exhaustion and relief in their expressions. "That's my daughter Jessica and her grandfather, my father, taken 3 years ago after his successful heart surgery," Diana continued. "The operation cost $180,000, and our insurance company denied coverage because they considered his age and condition too high risk for the experimental procedure he needed." Maya studied the photograph, noting the unmistakable atmosphere of a hospital and the way both people seemed to be celebrating something significant. "How did you manage to afford the surgery?" "We couldn't," Diana said simply. "We were 3 days away from losing him when I received an email from a stranger who'd heard about our situation through a medical support forum. Someone who offered to cover the entire cost of the surgery with no strings attached, no repayment expected. At first, I thought it was a cruel joke or an elaborate scam. But it turned out to be legitimate, a businessman who'd lost his own father to a treatable condition because of insurance barriers and had decided to spend his wealth preventing other families from going through the same experience." Diana paused to take a sip of her coffee, watching Maya's face carefully. "My father survived the surgery and lived for 2 more years, 2 years of watching Jessica graduate college, of teaching her to drive, of walking her down the aisle at her wedding last spring. 2 years that wouldn't have existed without that stranger's intervention." Maya felt her heart racing as the implications of Diana's story began to sink in. "And now I'm in a position to pay it forward," Diana confirmed. My father left Jessica and me his estate when he passed last year, not a fortune by some standards, but enough to live comfortably and enough to occasionally help families like yours. I've been monitoring medical support forums and crowdfunding sites, looking for situations where a relatively small intervention could make the difference between life and death. The coffee shop around them seemed to fade into the background as Maya processed what she was hearing. The rational part of her mind continued to insist that this was too good to be true, that no one simply gave away massive amounts of money to strangers. But Diana's story had too many specific details, too much emotional authenticity to be fabricated. I read about your mother's situation and saw myself 3 years ago, Diana continued. The desperation, the systematic rejection by institutions that should exist to help, the feeling that you're fighting a battle you can't win. But here's what I learned from that experience: sometimes the system fails, but that doesn't mean hope should fail. Sometimes ordinary people have to step up and create the solutions that should exist but don't. Maya found her voice, though it came out smaller than she intended. What exactly are you offering? Diana reached into her purse and withdrew a checkbook, placing it on the table between them. I'm offering to cover the full cost of your mother's surgery and rehabilitation. No loans, no repayment plans, no strings attached. The only condition is that if you're ever in a position to help another family in a similar situation, I hope you'll consider doing so. The words hung in the air between them like a bridge Maya was afraid to cross. The rational part of her mind cycled through all the reasons this couldn't be real. People didn't give away hundreds of thousands of dollars to strangers, there had to be hidden conditions or ulterior motives. This was exactly the kind of scenario her mother had warned her about when she was young. But, beneath the skepticism, Maya felt something she hadn't experienced in days: genuine hope. I don't understand, Maya said finally. Why would you do this for someone you don't know? Diana's expression grew thoughtful. 3 years ago, I was sitting in a hospital cafeteria at 2 a.m, crying over a cup of terrible coffee because I was about to lose my father to a system that valued profit over human life. I felt completely powerless, like I was watching a machine grind up everything I cared about and being unable to stop it. When that stranger reached out to help us, it didn't just save my father's life, it restored my faith in the possibility that individuals could create change when institutions failed. She leaned forward slightly, her voice becoming more intense. I learned something important from that experience. The feeling of powerlessness isn't about lacking resources, it's about lacking options. When someone creates an option for you, even if it seems impossible, it breaks the spell of helplessness. You start to believe that solutions exist, that people can surprise you, that the world isn't just a machine designed to crush your hopes. Maya felt tears starting to form in her eyes, but she blinked them back, still unwilling to fully believe what she was hearing. How do I know this is real? How do I know you're not going to give me a fake check or ask for my bank account information or? Because we're going to do this properly, Diana replied. We're going to walk to my bank, which is 3 blocks from here. I'm going to withdraw a certified check made out directly to St. Margaret's Hospital for the full amount of your mother's treatment. You're going to watch the transaction happen, verify the check with the bank manager, and then take it directly to the hospital's billing department. No money passes through your hands, no personal financial information is exchanged, and no obligations are created beyond the hope that kindness gets passed forward. Diana stood and began putting on her coat. But we need to leave now if we're going to get this done before the bank closes and before your mother's 18-hour window expires. The choice is yours, Maya. You can trust that sometimes extraordinary help comes from unexpected places, or you can let skepticism prevent you from accepting the solution you've been praying for. Maya felt the weight of the decision settling over her. Every instinct told her to be cautious, to investigate further, to protect herself from potential fraud. But when she thought about her mother lying unconscious 3 floors above them, about Dr. Hendrick's grave expression that morning, about the ticking countdown toward palliative care, she realized that caution was a luxury she couldn't afford. What if this is real, she asked, more to herself than to Diana. What if help really can come from nowhere when you need it most? Diana smiled, the first genuinely warm expression Maya had seen from her. Then, your mother gets her surgery, you get to keep fighting, and you learn that the world has more goodness in it than the headlines suggest. And, maybe someday, when you're in a position to help someone else's mother, you'll remember this moment and choose to pay it forward. Maya closed her laptop and gathered her things with shaking hands. As they walked toward the door of the coffee shop, she felt as if she was crossing a threshold into a different kind of story than the one she'd been living. Behind them, the normal rhythm of the coffee shop continued, people working on laptops, friends chatting over pastries, baristas calling out orders. But Maya felt as if she was moving through a different reality, one where strangers could transform your life with a simple offer of help. The walk to the bank took them through the heart of the downtown district, past office buildings and shops that Maya had seen countless times but which now seemed charged with possibility. Diana maintained a steady pace, occasionally pointing out landmarks or making small talk, but Maya could barely focus on the conversation. Her mind kept cycling between disbelief and desperate hope, between the fear that this was an elaborate deception and the growing conviction that she was about to witness something extraordinary. When they reached the imposing glass facade of First National Bank, Diana paused and turned to face Maya. "Last chance to change your mind," she said gently. "Once we go in there, your life changes. Not just because of the money, but because you'll have to integrate the knowledge that sometimes impossible things happen, that strangers can care about your suffering, and that the world has capacity for grace that most people never see." Maya looked through the bank's windows at the orderly rows of tellers and customers, at the institutional calm that seemed so far removed from the chaos of the past few days. Then, she thought about her mother's hands, about Dr. Hendrick's countdown, about the weight of helplessness she'd been carrying like stones in her chest. "Let's go save my mother," she said, and followed Diana through the doors into the cool, professional atmosphere of the bank, where ordinary people conducted ordinary business and where Maya was about to receive the most extraordinary gift of her life. Part 3, The Transformation of Strength. The bank's interior was all polished marble and hushed conversations, the kind of institutional quiet that suggested important business conducted with maximum efficiency. Diana approached the customer service desk with the confident stride of someone accustomed to being taken seriously, while Maya followed a half-step behind, still struggling to believe that the solution to her crisis could be as simple as a stranger writing a check. Within minutes, they were seated in a private office with Jennifer Walsh, a bank manager who seemed to know Diana well. The conversation proceeded with surreal normalcy as Diana explained her need for a certified check made out to St. Margaret's Hospital for the exact amount of Maya's mother's treatment. No elaborate explanations were required, no suspicious questions were asked, simply a routine transaction between a long-standing customer and her financial institution. "Will $215,000 be sufficient?" Diana asked, turning to Maya. "That should cover the surgery, rehabilitation, and any unexpected complications or extended care your mother might need." Maya nodded numbly, watching as Jennifer processed the paperwork with efficient professionalism. The manager showed no surprise at the large amount or unusual circumstances. Apparently, in the world of private banking, such transactions were simply part of the landscape. Within 20 minutes, Maya found herself holding a certified check that represented more money than she'd ever seen, made out to the hospital that was caring for her mother. "The check is valid for 90 days, Jennifer explained, "but I imagine you'll want to deliver it much sooner than that." She smiled warmly at Maya. "I hope your mother recovers quickly." As they left the bank, Maya felt as if she was carrying something far more significant than a piece of paper. She held in her hands the transformation of an impossible situation into a solvable problem. The late afternoon sun seemed brighter as they walked back toward the hospital, and Maya found herself noticing details of the city around her that had been invisible during her recent days of crisis. Children playing in a small park, elderly couples sharing benches and quiet conversation, workers heading home at the end of productive days. The world had not changed, but her relationship to it had shifted fundamentally. "I need to ask you something," Maya said as they approached the hospital. "Why didn't you just donate anonymously? Why meet with me face to face?" Diana considered the question for a moment. "Because anonymous giving, while noble, doesn't create the same kind of transformation. When someone helps you personally, when you see their face and hear their story, it changes how you think about human nature and your own capacity to help others. I wanted you to understand that what's happening isn't charity, it's one person choosing to use their resources to solve a problem that shouldn't exist in the first place." They entered the hospital through the main lobby, and Maya felt the familiar weight of the institutional atmosphere, the carefully controlled environment designed to manage crisis and suffering with maximum efficiency. But now she carried with her the power to change her family's story within this system, to transform from a desperate supplicant into someone who could demand the care her mother needed. Dr. Hendricks was in her office reviewing surgical schedules when Maya knocked on the door. The surgeon looked up with the weary expression of someone who had spent the day making life and death decisions, but her face brightened with surprise and hope when she saw Maya's expression. "Please tell me you have good news," Dr. Hendricks said, gesturing for Maya and Diana to sit down. Maya placed the certified check on the desk between them. "We can do the surgery. Dr. Hendricks picked up the check, examined it carefully, then looked at Maya with an expression of amazement that gradually shifted to professional determination. "This changes everything. I can have your mother in the operating room within 3 hours. The surgical team is standing by, and we've kept her condition stable specifically for this possibility." The next few hours passed in a blur of preoperative procedures, consent forms, and medical preparations. Diana remained at Maya's side throughout the process, offering quiet support and handling logistical details that Maya was too overwhelmed to manage effectively. As her mother was wheeled into surgery, Maya realized that the stranger who had rescued their family had become something more, a presence that represented the possibility of human connection transcending the usual boundaries of self-interest. The surgery lasted 6 hours. Maya and Diana spent the time in the family waiting area, sometimes talking, sometimes sitting in comfortable silence. Diana shared stories about her father's recovery and the ways his extended life had enriched their family. Maya talked about her mother's sacrifices, her dreams for completing graduate school, her fears about the future. As the hours passed, they moved from being strangers united by circumstance to something approaching friendship. When Dr. Hendricks finally emerged from the operating room, still wearing her surgical scrubs, her expression was one of cautious optimism. "The surgery went very well. We were able to clear the blockage completely and restore blood flow to the affected areas of her brain. There's some damage that may result in permanent changes, but nothing that should prevent her from having a good quality of life. She's stable, and the prognosis is excellent." Maya felt her knees buckle with relief, and Diana steadied her with a gentle hand on her arm. After days of helplessness and desperation, the simple words, "the prognosis is excellent," seemed to carry the weight of a miracle. "Can I see her?" Maya asked. "She's still unconscious from the anesthesia, but yes. She should wake up within the next few hours, and we'll know more about her neurological function then." "But, Maya, your mother is going to live. More than that, she's going to recover." The ICU where her mother lay recovering was the same room where Maya had maintained her desperate vigil, but now the atmosphere felt completely different. The monitors that had seemed ominous now provided reassuring evidence of stable vital signs and steady improvement. Her mother's face looked peaceful rather than frighteningly still, and Maya could see the slight movements that indicated natural sleep rather than unconsciousness. Diana stayed with Maya through the evening, helping her navigate the post-operative procedures and beginning to plan for the rehabilitation process that would follow. As her mother began to show signs of waking, small movements, responses to voices, Maya felt the final pieces of disbelief falling away. The crisis that had seemed insurmountable 24 hours earlier had been resolved by a stranger's decision to transform desperation into hope. "I don't know how to thank you," Maya said as they sat beside her mother's bed, watching the steady rise and fall of breathing that no longer required mechanical assistance. "Don't thank me yet," Diana replied. "Wait until your mother is walking around again, until she's back to teaching you to fold dumplings and worrying about your graduate studies. That's when you'll really understand what we accomplished today." Maya's mother opened her eyes around midnight, focusing slowly on her daughter's face with the confused clarity of someone emerging from deep unconsciousness. "Maya? What happened? Where am I?" The sound of her mother's voice, weak but undeniably present, nearly overwhelmed Maya with emotion. "You had a stroke, Mom, but you're going to be okay. You're going to be completely okay." Over the following days, as her mother progressed through the early stages of recovery, Maya began to understand the deeper implications of what had occurred. The stranger's offer had not simply provided money, it had demonstrated that individual action could overcome systemic failures, that personal responsibility could extend beyond self-interest to encompass the suffering of others. Diana visited daily during the first week, sometimes bringing flowers or books, but more often simply providing the steady presence of someone who understood the process of recovery and the mixture of gratitude and overwhelm that accompanied the sudden resolution of crisis. She helped Maya navigate insurance paperwork for the rehabilitation process, connected her with social workers who specialized in stroke recovery, and gradually became a mentor in managing the practical aspects of her mother's care. But, perhaps more importantly, Diana began sharing with Maya the network of people who had been touched by similar experiences, families who had received unexpected help during medical crises, individuals who had chosen to redirect their resources toward preventing others from experiencing the helplessness they had once felt. Maya discovered that her mother's salvation had been part of a larger, informal movement of people who had decided that systemic failures in healthcare could be addressed through individual action. "The man who helped my family 3 years ago started something," Diana explained during one of their conversations in the hospital cafeteria. "He didn't just save my father, he created a model for how people with resources could take direct responsibility for fixing problems that shouldn't exist. Every person he helped was asked to consider paying it forward when they were able. Not as an obligation, but as an opportunity to participate in creating the kind of world we want to live in." Maya began to understand that her experience was part of a larger story about human potential and moral choice. The weakness she had felt during the crisis, the helplessness in the face of institutional indifference, the desperation of watching someone you love suffer because of financial barriers, had been transformed into a different kind of strength. Not the strength of someone who had never faced adversity, but the strength of someone who had experienced the worst and discovered that help could emerge from unexpected sources. 3 weeks after the surgery, as her mother began the intensive rehabilitation process that would restore her speech and mobility, Maya received a phone call that would change her perspective once again. The caller identified himself as Marcus Rodriguez, and he had heard about her family's situation through the network of people Diana had mentioned. "My 8-year-old daughter needs a specific type of heart surgery," Marcus explained. "Our insurance will cover most of it, but we're short about $40,000 for the specialized recovery care she needs. I was wondering if you might know how to connect with people who help families in medical crises." Maya felt a strange sensation as she listened to Marcus describe his daughter's condition and their financial struggles. For the first time since her own crisis had begun, she was on the other side of the desperate phone call. She found herself thinking not just about Marcus's daughter, but about her own future and the resources she hoped to build through her career. "I can't help you financially right now," Maya told him honestly, "but I know someone who might be able to connect you with resources. And I want you to know something, when I'm in a position to help, I will be. Not because I owe anyone anything, but because I've learned that this is how the world gets better. One family at a time, one crisis at a time." After ending the call, Maya sat quietly in her mother's rehabilitation room, watching physical therapists help her practice walking between parallel bars. Her mother's progress had been remarkable. The doctors attributed her rapid recovery to her overall health and the excellent timing of the surgery, but Maya suspected it had more to do with her mother's fundamental resilience and determination to return to the life she had built through decades of hard work. "What are you thinking about?" her mother asked during a break in her therapy session. Her speech had returned almost completely, with only occasional difficulty finding specific words. "I'm thinking about the future," Maya replied. "About finishing my degree and starting my career and eventually being able to help other families the way we were helped." Her mother smiled, the expression carrying all the warmth and strength that had sustained Maya through childhood. "You know what your grandmother used to say about bamboo? It bends but doesn't break because it has deep roots and flexible strength. But she also said something else, that bamboo grows in groves, supporting each other through storms. Maybe that's what you're becoming part of." Maya looked around the rehabilitation room at the other patients and families working through their own recoveries and challenges. Each person carried their own story of crisis and hope, their own experience of the gap between what they needed and what systems could provide. But Maya now understood that individual action could bridge those gaps, that personal choice could create solutions when institutions failed. 6 months later, Maya completed her graduate degree in social work with a specialization in medical advocacy. Her thesis focused on the informal networks of mutual aid that had developed around healthcare crises, documenting how individual generosity could address systemic failures while building communities of people committed to preventing others from experiencing the desperation they had once felt. Her mother returned to work part-time, taking a position with lighter physical demands but remaining determined to maintain her independence. The experience had changed both of them, but not in the ways Maya had expected. Rather than making them feel vulnerable or dependent, the crisis and its resolution had connected them to a larger story about human resilience and the power of individuals to create change. Diana remained a presence in their lives, not as a benefactor to be constantly thanked, but as a friend who had demonstrated that extraordinary help could emerge from ordinary people making extraordinary choices. She attended Maya's graduation, celebrated Lin Chen's full recovery, and continued to serve as a bridge connecting families in crisis with resources and support. 2 years after her mother's surgery, Maya received her first opportunity to pay forward the help they had received. Working as a medical social worker, she encountered a family facing bankruptcy because of their son's cancer treatment costs. Using money she had saved from her new job, along with contributions from her mother and several friends, Maya was able to cover the gap between what insurance provided and what the family needed. The experience of giving rather than receiving help completed a transformation that had begun in the hospital waiting room where she had first felt the crushing weight of helplessness. Maya understood now that strength was not the absence of weakness, but the integration of vulnerability with the capacity to act despite uncertainty and fear. As Maya sat in her office one evening, reviewing cases and preparing for the next day's challenges, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. The crisis that had once seemed like evidence of her powerlessness had become the foundation for a different kind of strength, not the strength of someone who had never needed help, but the strength of someone who had experienced the worst and discovered that individuals could choose to create solutions when systems failed. Her mother's voice came back to her: "The man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others." Maya realized now that the weakness she had felt during the crisis, the fear, the helplessness, the crushing awareness of her limitations, had not been something to be destroyed but something to be transformed. The vulnerable person who had begged for help had become someone who could provide help, not by eliminating her capacity for vulnerability but by learning that strength could emerge from the integration of weakness with action, of personal need with the choice to serve others. The story that had begun with a daughter's desperate search for help had become something larger, a demonstration that individual moral choice could create ripples of change that extended far beyond the original crisis. Maya understood now that this was how the world got better, not through grand gestures or institutional reforms, but through ordinary people making extraordinary choices to help others, one family at a time, one crisis at a time, one decision at a time, to choose compassion over indifference. In the years that followed, Maya would help dozens of families navigate medical crises, connecting them with resources, advocating for policy changes, and occasionally providing direct financial assistance when other solutions weren't available. Each intervention was small in the scope of global problems but transformative in the lives it touched. And each family that received help was asked to consider paying it forward when they were able, creating an expanding network of people committed to ensuring that no one had to face alone the kind of crisis Maya and her mother had confronted. The story had become a testament to a simple but profound truth, that individual human beings, faced with the suffering of others, could choose to create solutions that should exist but don't. And that choice, repeated across thousands of individual decisions, could begin to reshape the world from the bottom up, one act of unexpected kindness at a time. Maya's mother lived for many more years, healthy and productive and grateful every day for the stranger's decision to transform their family's story. And, when she passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 82, she left behind a daughter who understood that the greatest strength comes not from never being weak, but from using the experience of weakness to fuel a lifelong commitment to ensuring that others don't have to suffer alone through crises that individuals, working together, have the power to solve.